we can probably agree that the scale of violence is quite extraordinary and not necessarily safe for anybody. War crimes are legitimate concerns which people protest against for other countries, that is to say not just Israel, in myriad small ways, such as nominal sanctions against universities, institutions and companies. It's a burden, in that sense, of the privilege of nationhood to, on the one hand, have a right to self-govern and also self-defense, but on the other hand, to not commit war crimes such as genocide, crimes against humanity, and thusly to have the respect and honour of membership in an organisation like the EAA, international bodies, revoked. Or at the very least, have it put in some sort of stasis, which is what was being proposed at EAA 2025.
Hello and welcome to another Watching Brief special report. This time we're reporting on the astonishing story of allegations that the president of the European Association of Archaeologists helped orchestrate a protest campaign to protest against a democratic decision made by her own executive board regarding the status of archaeologists with affiliations to Israeli universities and public bodies at the recent EAA annual meeting that was held virtually and in Belgrade in Serbia. So this story came about through basically journalism, through following social media and working sources, and this is the result. The pipeline can reveal allegations that the president of the beleaguered European Association of Archaeologists, Professor Esther Banfi, was instrumental in organising a covert campaign to pressure her own organisation into overturning a democratic decision supported by an absolute majority of members of the EAA executive board to require delegates to its annual meeting in Belgrade with affiliations to Israeli universities and public bodies to attend as individuals. Professor Banfi is understood to deny the allegations. On 22nd of August 2025, apparently in response to an earlier statement on the crisis in Gaza and to an open letter sent by the internet group Archaeologists Against Apartheid, calling on the academic body to take action in response to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the governing executive board of the European Association of Archaeologists passed a resolution to require delegates affiliated to Israeli universities and public bodies to attend the annual meeting of the association as individuals. The resolution, which was modelled on action taken by the EAA following the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia to require delegates from Russia and Belarus to similarly attend as individuals, had a clear democratic mandate, passing the executive board by 7 votes to 2. However, within days, the democratic mandate had been overturned following a pressure campaign which saw members of the executive board receive around 92 emails asking for the measure to be rescinded. Critical to the success of the campaign appears to be an email sent to members of the EAA leadership on the 29th of August, citing Professor Banfi and claiming, quote, Esther encourages everyone to send protest emails in masses to the EAA secretariat, end quote. The sender added, with the help of this, I shall try and make the board reverse the decision or at least reach the conclusion that the entire membership will be asked. That was another quote. The sender then included a statement on which recipients were asked to endorse so that it could be presented to the executive board at a meeting, quote, by the president. Now that statement read, and I'm quoting again, the undersigned members of the EAA dispute that the executive board has the authority to allow Israeli archaeologists to participate in the EAA conference 2025 only without their official affiliation. This decision contradicts the association's own statutes. We therefore consider this decision to be illegal. We therefore demand that this decision be withdrawn immediately, end quote. Now, unfortunately for those involved in what was alleged to have been a covert campaign involving the president, the circulation included members of the executive board who had supported the resolution on Israeli delegates and who reacted angrily to the letter's revelation that the president herself, or at the very least people close to her, were apparently trying to undermine the credibility and the integrity of the governance of their own organisation. One member of the executive board emailed colleagues summing up the situation as they saw it by saying, quote, "Words are not adequate to express the grave disappointment and dismay I have been feeling after reading yesterday's email. The president of the EAA has purposefully organised, fueled and actively encouraged reactions to undermine the decision taken by the vast majority of the members of the X board. Such an action clearly shows a complete disregard regarding democratic processes described in the statutes and the decisions taken by members of the board." End quote. Another wrote, and again I'm quoting, there's a lot of quotes in this story, quote, "Thank you for sharing with us the shocking news which directly implicates the president of the EAA in the blitz of harassing and aggressive emails that we've been receiving over the last week. This explains the geographic bias of the emails, which seem to largely coincide with the president's extended professional network." End quote. Professor Bunfi is a Hungarian and she's worked in Germany, and the pipeline understands that many of the protest emails did indeed come from those two countries. A Germany-based left-wing pro-Israel website, Jungle World, also reported the controversy, using material apparently briefed out by one or more individuals with access to the protest emails. Jungle World concluded, "Determined advocacy," and this is a quote again, "determined advocacy eventually led the Archaeologists Association to relent." Now, determined advocacy is one way of describing what dropped into the inboxes of the members of the executive board. While some emails sent to the members of the executive board were regretful and reasoned, one threatened legal action and attempts to lobby the Greek government and organisers over the next annual meeting of the EAA, which is due to take place in Athens. Others were vitriolic. Board members were accused of aligning the EAA with the so-called boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, and some emails even accused members of anti-Semitism. One email associated that the EAA had created its own version of the virulently anti-Semitic Nazi slogan, "Kauf nicht bei Juden," don't buy from Jews, while another concluded, quote, "Your support for terror groups retracts your academic and moral accountability. Trust me, truth will get hold of you with time. I do not envy any of you. Fuck you." End quote. Overall, it's claimed that the situation left at least one board member in tears, while another sought medical advice for stress, and some executive board members are understood to be angry that their health and safety may have been put at risk by the actions of their own organisation. With a UN report declaring the actions of the Israeli government in Gaza, that the actions of the Israeli government in Gaza meet 3 of the 4 criteria to be defined as a genocide, the revelation that Professor Bunfi may have had a role in the campaign to overturn what many members regard as a democratic decision to impose the mildest of sanctions in the face of a growing humanitarian catastrophe will only add to the questions the organisation has to answer about its role in the wider world, its governance, and about whether the leadership of the EAA as it currently stands can remain in post. While some defended the decision to reverse the decision on the status of Israeli delegates as keeping politics out of academic archaeology, the annual business meeting, which concluded the meeting in Belgrade, saw repeated calls for Professor Bunfi and the members of the executive board to resign. Now, the pipelines approached the European Association of Archaeologists for comment, but at the time of publication, we've not received any response to that request. However, sources have reported that when the members of the executive board questioned Professor Bunfi about her role in the campaign, she denied any involvement in organising a lobbying campaign to overturn the vote requiring delegates to EAA 2025 in Belgrade with affiliations to Israel and universities and public bodies to attend as individuals, and suggested instead that private conversations had been misinterpreted. Now, as always, if you have any thoughts on that story, or if you have any more information about that story, please contact the pipeline. Our emails and contact details are on the pipeline website under Tip Us a Story. And if you're watching this video online, please like and share. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Watching Brief. This is a special report, and that was a summary of the Pipeline article that Andy published a few hours ago over on the Pipeline with the headline, "Exclusive, EAA President accused of helping orchestrate protest campaign against her own executive board's Gaza vote." Now, we're about to discuss this in slightly more detail, but before we do, I have a few notes and caveats that I want to read out based on conversations that have unfolded in comments on previous videos leading up to this and also elsewhere. So bear with me if you will. First of all, this is not about anti-Semitism. Overturning the democratic vote through intimidation of your own board is not good, particularly as president of that board. So what we're reporting on here is the culture of management and the reasoning, possibly, or the reasons that we can tell and that we can glean from this behaviour and this action. As for the rather euphemistic and asymmetrical notion of a war that's unfolding in Gaza, levelling Gaza and killing tens of thousands of civilians is not conducive to the survival of hostages. So no matter who it is you care about in this particular conflict, more so, if you do care about a certain group more, we can probably agree that the scale of violence is quite extraordinary and not necessarily safe for anybody. War crimes are legitimate concerns which people protest against for other countries, that is to say not just Israel, in myriad small ways, such as nominal sanctions against universities, institutions and companies. It's a burden, in that sense, of the privilege of nationhood to, on the one hand, have a right to self-govern and also self-defense, but on the other hand, to not commit war crimes such as genocide, crimes against humanity, and thusly to have the respect and honour of membership in an organisation like the EAA, international bodies, revoked. Or at the very least, have it put in some sort of stasis, which is what was being proposed at EAA 2025. The International Association of Genocide Scholars has come to the conclusion that this is a genocide unfolding in Gaza, and in recent days the UN Commission of Inquiry on Occupied Palestine Territory has also said that this is a genocide. That, I think, is beyond dispute. The research and work of academics themselves from Israel was still welcome at the conference in Belgrade. Individuals were not being boycotted. It was the most nominal and light-touch sanction which had precedent in an application to Russian and Belarusian delegates at a previous conference. This was because Russia enacted an illegal war of aggression in Ukraine. As I say, this is about the burden of nationhood. It is not about one's ethnicity or one's religion. If members wanted to debate and or get rid of that statute within the EAA's constitution, this is not, as this statement that you heard from Andy suggested, an illegal act within the EAA's constitution, then a campaign, not a harassment campaign, to debate that might have been a more sensible move on behalf of the President and others within the EAA. Now, if I might just slightly expand this a little bit, I think this, as far as my observation goes, is part of a pattern that we have observed over the years doing Watching Brief, of an unfortunate instinct to batten down hatches, obfuscate and or lie about what's actually unfolding within one's organisation. We'll talk about this in a moment. But the statements from the EAA were making, giving the impression that there was a campaign that was being orchestrated by persons unknown that was affecting the board. That's clearly not the case, as far as we can tell. And finally, the importance of talking about these matters, and talking about these matters within bodies such as the EAA, is to break down a cloud of fear in professional bodies, to add pressure, which is legitimate, for example, in the case of South Africa on apartheid. Small, myriad acts of hope, dare I say, in the face of insurmountable and unimaginable crimes, and also the ability to speak out. And one final thing to say, as far as this show is concerned, but given that this is an archaeological and anthropological, broadly speaking, news show, it's undoubtedly the case that archaeology is used by illegal settlers as a means of justifying their actions in the West Bank and elsewhere. This was actually seen, and I'll link below to a BBC News article recently where Marc Rubio was invited to an opening of an archaeological dig, an archaeological park that actually tunnelled underneath an occupied Eastern Jerusalem settlement, so underneath Palestinian homes, in order to find Israeli archaeology or ancient Jewish archaeology. So undeniably, archaeology is a tool of the Israeli state, and therefore archaeologists have a right and a reason to have an opinion on what has and is unfolding. So with all of that said, and I will be referring to this section of the video if people are commenting below with the usual responses, I will certainly refer you to this section. Let's begin our conversation. Andy, where would you like to start?
I think I'd like to begin by just endorsing what you've just said very, very clearly. For me, certainly, this isn't a story about the rights and wrongs of the Israeli government's actions in Gaza. Everybody watching this will have their own opinions about that. Many will be deeply disturbed by what's going on. Others will see it as legitimate self-defense on the part of the state of Israel. As you pointed out, internationally, things are falling, broadly speaking, at the moment into the box marked "this is disproportionate and potentially genocidal." But given it is such a fraught and emotionally loaded discussion, one has to start by saying, I think, archaeologists exist in the real world. And what the EAA was trying to do was to respond to those actions in the real world, but from a very particular viewpoint, and we can talk about what that viewpoint might have been. And in the end, for me, and why I started researching it and then writing about it in the way that hopefully people have just either heard or seen, this is a story about actually governance. And it's about how organizations relate to their membership and how they relate to the world that they exist within. And I think on all of those areas, in this story at least, the EAA has come up wanting.
I agree. I think what's quite telling in this instance was the way in which it was actually quite difficult to understand what was unfolding at conference. This at the 2025 conference in Belgrade, there were reports of people being silent, having silent protests, or even just not turning up to events, and papers being presented. There were reports of papers being withdrawn from the event in protest. And there was also, as well, I think, understandably, concern that perhaps the board was being threatened with insurmountable legal action by very deep pockets. Some of the implications being, pressure groups in the US, etc. And that may well have been a somewhat understandable reason for doing a U-turn on this decision, which, as I said, was the most nominal possible gesture that they could have taken, just asking people to come as themselves and not extend, as I say, the honour of being part of this international group for this particular year to their institution. Do you think, is it at all possible that and we'll come back to this notion of don't be political in a moment, at some point during our conversation. But is it possible that a president of an organization in this moment might have wanted to not be political, even though the organization had previously been political, as I say, with regards to Russia and Belarus, and that this urge to try and change the minds of fellow board members got out of hand, that perhaps people were receiving almost a chain email effect of this decision has been made, and it started to balloon in people's minds as being something akin to the worst stages of people being marginalized, for example, in Third Reich Germany. Is it possible that this is what we're seeing? I'm trying to be charitable, I suppose.
I mean, the short answer to that is I don't know. I can only work with the material that has been shared with me. And some of that has been material has been shared with me on the basis of in some cases confidentiality. You'll notice I'm deliberately not used names apart from the president in the article, and that's because the president was being quoted directly. As at the very least an observer in what was going on, a knowing observer of what was going on, if not an active participant in the campaign to overturn the decision to ask Israeli delegates to appear at EAA 2025 as individuals. Perhaps if I just lay out very, very briefly. I mean, obviously, I've talked about it at length in the article in the header of this particular watching brief discussion in the preamble, if you like. But just very, very briefly, what happened was we're going in. We're basically, it's the events of less than a month in late August, early September, 2025 as we're recording. The executive board received an open letter from Archaeologists Against Apartheid, which crystallised the feeling among many members of the EAA that the EAA, as an international ethical archaeological body, needed to make a response to what was going on in Gaza. And
so, of course, the EAA directly communicated with Archaeologists Against Apartheid.
I'll come to that in a minute.
Okay.
So the EAA is under pressure from its own members to take some visible action about Gaza, and in that regard, they are in common with pretty much any body certainly in the Western world at the moment, where the issue of what is happening in Gaza, what the Israeli government is doing to Gaza, is probably one of the most difficult, contentious, controversial, brutal and heartbreaking things that are going on the planet. And again, people will point out South Sudan and so on. Yes, many other things are going on, appalling things are going on in the world.
More appalling things doesn't take away from the appalling nature of this thing.
Precisely. And and the big issue for EAA was a bit like the Eurovision Song Contest. EAA has members from Israel, which isn't normally classed as part of Europe. But for the European Broadcasting Union, Israel is part of Europe, and for the EAA, Israel is part of Europe. So again, there's nothing wrong with that status. That's a decision that's been taken, but with that membership, I think, comes responsibility, as you pointed out in your monologue. Anyway, the Archaeologists Against Apartheid open letter, and again, this was completely open. This wasn't a behind-the-scenes lobby campaign. It was a published open letter on the internet, which people were asked to sign up to. And it was and the context for this as well is that the EAA has made statements on Gaza over the last few years. It's gone through, I think, 3 or 4 iterations up to the present. The most recent was published in, I think, November 2024. Basically calls on all sides to stop fighting, find a settlement, and not to target the historic environment. Again, the part of the background to this is UNESCO reporting that it has verified damage to dozens of cultural sites in Gaza, including archaeological sites. And the fact that independent, the open source journalistic Operation Bellingcat recently verified damage to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission cemetery in Gaza, damage that was allegedly done by during an occupation by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. So that's the background that EAA is operating in. The executive board passes this resolution, which, as you say, it's the mildest of sanctions it could have passed. It's basically saying, yes, you are very welcome to come and present your paper, Israeli scholar, but for now, we are not, we're not using affiliations to Israeli universities and public bodies such as the Israeli Antiquities Authority. In fact, go on.
Well, I was going to say, but to put that another way, it's an international body saying your institution does not get to claim the honour, as I say, of being a member of this body this year. You know, and again, it wasn't even an indefinite status. It was for now. Can you just come as yourself, please?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, nobody was being excluded per se. Certainly nobody was being excluded because they were Jewish.
No.
The exclusion was a political judgment based on current situation, on the current situation. Now, the upshot of that was the moment the decision was published, and this was a couple of weeks before the EAA 2025 virtual meeting began in Belgrade, and again we can maybe talk about the status of that meeting. The pressure campaign to reverse the decision began, and the letter, the email that we quote in the Pipeline article was part of that pressure campaign, and it came a few days before the again, a lot of this is about procedure. It appears that some sort of emergency meeting of the executive board was undertaken just a couple of days before the Belgrade conference, it reversed the decision, and it wasn't made clear why, although there were reports in social media about pressure being brought on members of the executive board to change their minds.
Yes.
What we didn't know at the time was the fact that the president appears to, and certainly people close to the president, appear to have been involved directly in orchestrating that campaign. That reversal was met with absolutely open fury by many of the members. There was an immediate campaign to and protest action whereby people did everything from withdrawing papers from the conference to resigning memberships. Our colleague and friend of the show, Professor Umberto Albarella, who was a member of the EAA, published on social media the fact that he was going to resign from the organisation.
Yes.
He was not alone in that. And in fact, I understand that from information that we've been sent, that was sent out to members, something like approaching 30 odd sessions were cancelled.
Yeah.
And dozens of papers were pulled. There were statements from the Irish Association of Archaeologists and also the Portuguese equivalent condemning what EAA had done. In response, the EAA leadership issued a series of statements. It got down to almost a statement a day, some of which did not help, it has to be said. In one case, for example, the statement used the phrase collective punishment regarding the resolution that the board had passed. Now, collective punishment is a crime against humanity, and the use of that term for I think what a lot of people would say was the mildest of rebukes, where nobody's excluded, is, it was if it was punishing anybody, it was punishing the reputations of official Israeli bodies that hadn't commented or were supporting what was going on in Gaza
in the short term.
in the short term,
Yes.
precisely. So it was put it this way, the comms were a screw up.
Yeah. Well, the comms weren't clear. They appeared at times to be clarifying the previous public statement that was made by the EAA, but also they were being made on behalf of the entire executive board or ex-board.
Yes.
This, as far as we can tell from our sources, was not accurate.
That's right. I mean, I've spoken and corresponded with a number of sources about this. At the moment, all of them have asked to maintain their anonymity because of the fraught nature of what's going on, and also the fact that many of them, and they stress, they do not want to destroy the EAA.
No.
They think the EAA, particularly on the strength of this, needs reform, but they want that reform to be positive and brought about by the agreement of its membership. So that's
and in that sense, for what is apparently a democratic membership-led organisation to do what it says on the tin,
precisely,
to be led by that democratic mandate. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. But when it comes to democratic mandates, my sources have told me, and I have not seen any evidence to the contrary, that the firefighting or the pouring of the petrol, if you want to look at it in a more cynical way, in terms of the how the decisions were communicated, and then how the response to the decisions was communicated, and crisis comms are a skill for media professionals, and the comms here actually exacerbated the crisis.
Yes,
for EAA.
Yeah.
But
so I should just say I smirk there because this is far from the first time that we've seen crisis comms mishandled by archaeological bodies. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, my sources have told me that all of that comms response was handled by the president and a couple of other people. It was not signed off by the executive board or the senior management bodies of EAA.
But it was also misleading. In so much as in the broader campaign that was brought on to contact and or pressure the board, stated that this stuff was counter to the protocols within the organisation itself. How are we to think about this notion of the president? So I was going to say, can you imagine the president of the United States acting counter to the Constitution? but freedom of speech, etc. But in this instance, how are we to think about this action? In so much as, for the most part, the leader of an organisation like this, with a board, is there to speak for, but also to be at the head of what is collective responsibility. And in that sense, sometimes you have to do things that you don't personally agree with, but your organisation has voted for.
Yeah.
How are we supposed to think about this? And at this point, I will gently say we have seen similar here in the UK from some of our institutions, where someone at the top of a body essentially makes a unilateral decision that this is what's going to happen, regardless of what the majority of membership thinks.
Yeah.
Is this, when we're thinking about how to think about this, is this, as I've suggested before, a potential issue with academics and maybe even archaeologists, ironically enough, not being able to handle actual democratic actions within their organisations? To put it another way, do we have an authoritarian problem in some of these institutions? Be as hypothetical as you want there.
Yes. Look, I mean, when I published this last night, I put on the post on social media or some of the posts on social media that, I've been covering this stuff for over 10 years now. We've covered a number of stories on Watching Brief about governance. And this is the most incompetent, egregious case that we've covered. That said, I've had more information and more support from the people involved in terms of getting the information out to the public who know and care about these things than I've had, from example, in any of the organisations that we've covered in the UK.
Yeah, and it should be said. Observing this process, because often you will handle the back conversation until it gets to a point where they're comfortable for their thoughts to be shared with me as well. What I should say is that in the past we've been this close to having a truly important ability to say something, and then our source has gone, actually no, I don't want to risk my reputation or whatever, or get into an argument with people. So in that sense, this has been a very principled, I would say, and brave act by our sources.
Absolutely, I can't stress that enough. This this wouldn't have come out without the action of some very brave and principled whistleblowers.
Yeah,
and that's the kind of information that we rely on for these heavy hitting, important but very difficult stories, particularly when archaeology is such a small world.
Yes.
But no, I mean, you mentioned collective responsibility, and I mean, I'm a member of a board of a charity, and we are bound by collective responsibility. There was, a number of times, including recently, as a board, we've taken decisions where I was in a minority, but I'm bound by collective responsibility. The point is, though, what's supposed to happen is if your point of view in an organisation which operates on the basis of committees and boards and collective responsibility, if you find yourself in a minority of one and it's something you feel should be overturned, then you resign and you make your point of view known and you campaign openly. What happened here was nobody resigned. The campaign was started, but the campaign was started with apparently the full support of the president and senior officers. But it was not done openly. And that has provoked absolute fury from a large part of the EAA's membership.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I suppose we can take all day to reiterate the undemocratic nature of that. And also, actually, to a certain extent, the irony inherent in that, particularly around the issues that people are taking action against.
Yeah.
I suppose there's no reason to draw this episode out. We have said what we came here to say. We've reported on it, and I want to thank you. And also our sources for their time in this matter. I suppose finally, is there any initial responses that we're getting from members or from people on this story?
Right. Well, it's a story that, I mean, the EAA senior leadership may have wanted to, or may have hoped that this was going to die down after the Belgrade virtual meeting. There's no sign of that happening. In fact, there are moves to call an extraordinary meeting of the EAA to discuss this and discuss changing the constitution of the EAA so that, for example, there can be votes of no confidence in the leadership.
And hopefully this extraordinary meeting won't at the last minute be made on site only as opposed to online, as the closing ceremony was at the Belgrade conference. I'm just highlighting that because that was something we didn't mention in this episode.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, and to be fair, again, I'm only talking about things that I've got corroboration for.
Yes,
right?
Of course, yeah.
And although it was reported that the business meeting, the closing ceremony, rather, was made in present only, and again, this is one of the cloth-eared things that the EAA leadership did. Again, I don't cover it in the current article because that's covering a fairly
it's a focused bit of
reporting.
Yes.
It's the core focus of what went wrong.
Yeah.
Many other things spun off going horribly wrong from that. The wreckage flew off in all directions. And one of the directions was the way that the EAA leadership tried to get the local organisers and the local volunteers, many of whom were unpaid students, to police their no political statements rules that they imposed on the sessions. So, for example, an email was circulated that told session supervisors that if somebody made a political statement, they were to be warned, and if they insisted on continuing to make a political statement at the beginning of their paper, then they would be muted. Now, what the leadership seems to have completely failed to understand is the fraught nature of public life in Serbia at the moment, where there is political unrest. The idea of asking people who are fighting against political, overbearing political bodies and censorship to themselves censor was just completely out of order. And in fact, it prompted the Belgrade Committee to issue a really stiff rebuke to the EAA leadership, saying, saying we up with this, we will not put.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. I suppose just on that note, we'll come back to people's reactions in a second. Sorry, I just remembered that I did want to touch on this question of not being political. Anyone making a political statement. Archaeology deals with nothing but political statements. Relationships between people is actually what politics is, power dynamics. Yeah. So whether it's between individuals in terms of a formal conflict, whether it's about gender roles, whether it's about a new interpretation of an archaeological site, or whether it's about using archaeology to justify, for example, whether or not you put a legal settlement on land, politics is in the bones of archaeology, and this is one of the things that I find deeply frustrating about our leadership here. And note, dear viewer, that no UK body commented on this. Ireland had a comment coming out of its senior archaeological institution, but not here. And the idea that you can not be political when, for example, as we've reported on this year, your membership is being and your colleagues are being affected by massive changes in the law, and that you can just talk about the nice things that archaeology does is, I think, delusional. Because the nice things that archaeology does, let's say you're talking about a Roman fort. Roman fort. It's lovely. Come along, have a bit of a play. The kids get to pretend to be in the Roman army, and we all have a grand time. Scones and tea at the tea shop. But Roman forts are political. They were, especially here in the north of England, they are crucial to an understanding of what it's like to live in potentially an occupied land. Yeah. Was there continuity, for example, in farming practice? What was it like having to do business in a slightly different way, perhaps in a forum, and pay tax to people who you're never going to meet, and so on and so forth? It is delusional to think that you can separate this stuff. And just coming now back to the point, it's also bizarre, as you say, to be so detached from where you've put your conference as to ask those students to be politically draconian and to be censoring people. I think what's interesting there is that not long after this story came out, I did a very initial reaction over on my TikTok, just saying I'm sort of dreading talking about this because of the way it connects to so many patterns that we see in senior management in archaeology across the world, but certainly here at home. And someone commented saying that for a long time they felt as though they suspected that being a paying EAA member was more or less just allowing the senior members of the organisation to have a lovely excursion and go to different cities across across the continent and to have a good time. They then said that they are now convinced that that is the case. So even within the body itself, that is deeply political. That's a power dynamic right there.
Yeah.
Membership and the use of power, in this instance by an individual at the top of the board. So that, yeah, I just wanted to touch on that in this episode. Archaeology is political, and archaeologists who pretend that it can't, that it isn't, and that it's possible to do archaeology without any sort of politics, infringing upon your hobby, because that's what it is at that point. Oh, it's just something nice. Okay, it's a hobby then. It's not a serious academic pursuit. Those people are deluding themselves, no matter how comfortable they may at times feel in their positions. Okay, I'll put my socialist scarf away now. So have there been any comments that we can bring to bear in this episode, or?
Well, I'll say two things. First of all, as I alluded to earlier, this isn't over.
No.
There is a report doing the rounds, which I think we'll probably be discussing probably next week now, which puts out an alternate and much more detailed timeline as to what happened allegedly than the EAA executive has put out and discussed at its business meeting and subsequently. Again, it is alleged, for example, that things have been selectively misquoted, events have been timelines have been compressed, and important events have been missed out, and so on and so on and so on. That I say that is currently in circulation to EAA members. I've seen a copy, and we'll be talking about that. There is this move to have the constitution changed through an extraordinary meeting. There is some confusion as to when the deadline to vote for that is going to take place. Originally, it was the end of this month, the end of September, but there was a report now that it has actually been that the campaign has actually been shortened, so the votes have to be in by this weekend. Again, that's unclear as to how that's come about, if it's come about. And then the EAA has proposed motions that are similar but not the same to the motion that has been to an open letter that's been doing the rounds calling for this extraordinary meeting. So whether they're trying to spike the guns of the opposition by bringing forward their own motion, which they've got more control over. There's a lot of machinations going on at the moment. Just on that note of interactions between parties, can you just confirm, did they ever directly address the organisation Archaeologists Against Apartheid? Well, again, that's one of the interesting aspects of the story. Part of the reaction to the open letter and to the subsequent vote of the executive board was that, and this was in those crisis comms that we talked about. It was there were allusions that to the idea that Archaeologists Against Apartheid were a secretive political pressure group, and that somehow the EAA had been bullied into this particular.
And we in that sense, as observers, were allowed to make the connection between the campaign and these bodies. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. And in fact, the EAA told its members in the timeline that they published for the business meeting that they had sought advice from some of their committees about Archaeologists Against Apartheid. In fact, I've seen an email whereby a member of the EAA leadership talks about using AI to do a deep dive into what Archaeologists Against Apartheid actually are.
Sorry, so a senior archaeological mind, an academic mind, actually delegated research into an organisation to ChatGPT.
other AI
AIs are
theft bots
available.
are available. Yeah, that appears to be the case.
Honestly.
Because, well, I think what it's what's important about that is that it shows how uninformed the leadership actually are. Because Archaeologists Against Apartheid, it's not a new organisation. It's not even a secret organisation. They're anonymous, but they operate openly on the internet. They don't send out emails on background.
But the thing is, again,
they circulate emails among supporters who've signed up.
And again, this isn't the first time we've seen this sort of thing. See, say, British Archaeology and University Archaeology UK. Small groups and groupthink going, we don't know who this is. What is this? And then coming to the worst possible conclusions.
Yes, I'm put it this way. I am in touch with a spokesperson for Archaeologists Against Apartheid.
Yeah.
I hope we'll have more to say about that again in future as well. But on the specific question you asked, I have been told that at no point did the EAA reach out to Archaeologists Against Apartheid to try to understand their position or to come up with an agreed position that could be put to the EAA governing body like the Executive Board and to the EAA membership.
Okay. Well, shall we leave then further reporting and response and reaction to an upcoming episode? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would just like though to finish with some comments from a colleague who's a member of the AA and has been heavily engaged with this. And actually, I think it's fair to say they won't mind me saying conflicted over a lot of what's gone on, because again, they're a supporter of the organisation. They sent me a long message, and they made a number of points, but there's a couple of things, and I think why this issue of governance is important, and particularly at the moment, we've just seen the alleged erosion of First Amendment free speech in the United States by attempting to shut down late night TV satirists and comedians. This is a bit more serious than, well, no, it's not. It's part and parcel of the same thing. And what our colleague said, talking about the pressure campaign, I find it shocking that such pressure was communicated to individual board members and that they allegedly had to seek medical help and were in mental turmoil. Even more concerning is that the pressure was, quote, successful, as in people changed their votes. This highlights, as nowadays is often seen in politics, that such campaigns are able to erode democracy. While I feel deeply sorry for the people who experienced that pressure, I'm also quite concerned that they actually gave into it, as this is how anti-democratic movements win. And I think, if people are asking, why are we talking about this? Why does, people trying to manipulate, allegedly, an archaeological body, an academic archaeological body, why does this matter? That's why it matters. A democratic decision was taken according to the procedures that EAA has talked about and sets out to uphold. And then when the decision went, in the view of some people, the wrong way, rather than seek to, as I said earlier, to resign, campaign openly to overturn it, there was a secretive campaign that arguably overstepped the bounds of what's acceptable in terms of campaigning. And it has led to this kind of reputational disaster to the EAA at the very least. And all the time, innocent men, women and children in Gaza are dying every day.
Yeah. I think just on that note, one final thing I'll say is I had someone comment on one of the videos leading up to this one, saying that what are archaeologists doing talking about this stuff anyway, and what's the use of such hopeless and small actions? what could it possibly achieve? Not only have I already pointed out in my opening statement that small actions are actually what pressure is made up out of, as I say, look at South Africa and apartheid. But also as well, if these small actions don't matter, why was the reaction against them so vicious?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, guys, that's been a Watching Brief special report. We'll be back next week, in fact, with probably a follow-up of some sort. If you want to comment below, please do feel free. Keep the comments civil. Please do not argue at the point about anti-Semitism, etc. That is not what any of this incident has been about. And as I say, you'll be referred to my previous statement if those sorts of comments do turn up. And I suppose finally, be good to each other. That's ultimately what this is about. It's about being humane and attempting to navigate a very difficult path, and a path that's intimately connected to the responsibilities of being a law-abiding nation and law-abiding people. But obviously, archaeology isn't political. Until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.